All right, Scott. Well, thanks again for being a guest on Wicked Smart Golf. Really excited to talk with you today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Looking forward to it. I definitely know from our conversations that you've had some success with this over the last bit with improving your game. So should be fun to see where it can meander.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like I said, when I reached out, I was like, man, I feel like a fanboy as much as as much as anything. Your system really does work, and I can't wait to get into it. So, when I was doing some research about you too, though, I really loved your background. It's very different than most golf stories. I know you consider yourself the Moneyball of golf, and I love that because Moneyball is a great movie, and your system is very very similar. So let me get this straight. You have 3 math degrees. You used to play professional golf and are an avid poker player. Is that right?
I was an avid poker player. I haven't unfortunately gotten to play as much in the last 10 years, but I do have. Man, I've been watching a lot of poker videos on YouTube, and I've got an itch to go play more than you can possibly imagine. It's funny actually, going along with the idea of kind of being in analytics my whole life. Chris Como and I met playing in an underground poker room back in 2004 here in Dallas. We were actually friends for like 2 years before we realized we were both in the golf business. And that's when I started working on my golf game with him also. So I love poker, but I've not been able to play much in the last 10 years, but that's going to change this year, or
Okay.
2023, I should say.
I love it. I just feel like your mind is you're obviously a numbers guy. You have, you're the definition of wicked smart on and off the golf course. So, this is where like it blows my mind because you read the book, Every Shot Counts by Mark Brody. What was that, like 2013, 2014?
2014.
So you read that book, and then guys, if you haven't read the book, again, it is a beast. It is a great golf book, though. It is more analytical and detailed than probably any book I've read in the golf world. So you read that, and it's already got numbers everywhere. It's giving you just stats and data using ShotLink, and then you go and one up it, right, and then create your own system.
Well, so it's funny because, and thank God I wrote a few of these threads. So there's an online poker forum called 2plus2. And so I used to post in, they've got a golf forum. I wouldn't feel good enough at poker to actually post in the poker sections, but it's a great community with like health and fitness and diet and exercise and, investing and like all these different sub forums, and golf is one of them. So it's like everybody's way to give back is whatever they're good at. They kind of just do ask me anything threads. And so back in 2011, I actually wrote a thread when they first started releasing. They actually didn't call it strokes gained putting; they called it putts gained. And I wrote a thread just titled "Is drive for show, putt for dough really true?" Because whenever I was playing in my 20s, like I hit the ball really well and I didn't putt very good, and I definitely thought that was my main issues. And there's just so much that you can analyze in hindsight, but I really wanted to analyze, is drive for show, putt for dough really true? And that was kind of the genesis, only based on strokes gained putting. And then it's funny because I actually was just trying to do something recently, and I found this email that I sent to Will Zalatoris' dad back in 2013 or 2012, when it was a Wall Street Journal article on every shot counts. And I was just like, I bet you this book is going to do exactly what I've been telling you I think I can do with like solving course management with shot patterns and strokes to hole out numbers. And it was a great Wall Street Journal article. And luckily they actually started releasing all the strokes gained statistics prior to Every Shot Counts coming out. And so I just started taking, again, if you can create kind of a generic shot pattern, which imagine rather than having a rifle, like as though you actually know where the golf ball is going to go. If you're throwing darts at a dartboard, well, if you watch me throw darts, it looks like a shotgun pattern too. But basically our shot patterns look like shotguns. And then if we know how many strokes to hole out, you can start choosing targets much better. So if you have to make a bullseye and you aren't good at darts, if you are good at darts, you should be centering your entire shot pattern directly over the bullseye. But if you have to, and I don't know darts well, but a double 20, is that the outer ring? If you have to hit that one specifically, you should be centering your shot pattern directly over it. But if missing the board was a $10 penalty, then maybe that wouldn't be optimal, even though that's the only one you need. And so once you start understanding the size of your shot patterns, and then again, these strokes to hole out, you really can start to optimize target selection. And that's really all golf is at the end of the day. It's just a giant math game. And where poker and blackjack and craps and all these other games are obviously math games, golf has never really been thought of one historically because it's a sport. But I guarantee you now at this point, it really is a math game based on your abilities. And again, once you start letting people see through that lens, it also helps them be more patient and disciplined and less psychotic and all the other things that are going to help us in golf.
Yeah, man. I still am just trying to figure out like how long did that take you? Then you read the book, and then how long before the first iteration of
I
Decade
actually,
or
I
your?
actually did it all before reading the book. The book
Oh,
didn't
you
come
did.
out
Okay.
until April of 2014.
Okay.
And I actually did all of the work the last quarter of 2013 and the first, through about when the book came out. Again, the book definitely had an influence, but I'd already kind of created everything. It just reinforced the numbers more than
Mm-hmm.
anything. And so really it's through the end of 2013, the first half of 2014. And that's when I was really just doing it for my own game, and that's only just because Will Zalatoris, is a junior golfer at my course at the time. I had an injury the week before the Texas Amateur, which is the only reason I reached out to him to say, "Dude, I can't play next week. Let me caddy for you now." And we met for lunch, and I explained to him everything that the basis of it, because I do believe that understanding the math and the logic, honestly, as much as anything, it's the logic of why we're doing what we're doing. That is the most important part of it. So 2014, the Texas Amateur, I caddied for him where he won his first amateur golf tournament by 3, and then I caddied for him the following month when he won the U.S. Junior. And obviously he's been off to the races since. But I just posted on Twitter actually this morning. Some Monday qualifying guy posted somebody's just crazy card with like 10 birdies and they still shot like 75 or something ridiculous. I was like, shoot, I've got the same thing in a folder from Zalatoris, January of 2014, where it was like 10 birdies and an eagle in 36 holes and shot even. And he was laughing about it. And I'm like, that's the exact thing that shows me when you can play is you're just firing at every single pin, which does work out quite often, but then you also make way too many bogeys and doubles. And that's, really, it winds up making it be a negative expectation play. It's like an analogy that's easy for people to understand on that is if you and I were flipping coins and every time you got it wrong, you gave me $10, and every time you got it right, I gave you 20. It wouldn't take very long for me to realize this is a bad bet. Even though it's still a 50-50 proposition, the odds are not in my favor. That's really at the end of the day what every golf decision of should I fire at this flag, and again, this is where middle of the green is oftentimes just as bad as right at the flag, because you have given away all birdies by being too conservative. And so yeah, you're making fewer bogeys, but you're making no birdies. Again, it all depends on your ability, but it's just not a simple question in golf to answer of what strategy should be.
Yeah, by the way, huge fan of Will. Love watching him, man. That's so cool how that one injury for you kind of helped jumpstart his career a lot, and you were able to caddy for him and develop that relationship. So love watching him, his swing and shot making, and obviously his abilities are incredible. So that's been always fun to watch, and I like how they always name drop you. I'm always like, yep, that's Scott. He's the guy. So you talked about a few of the concepts already. So I recorded a solo podcast just talking about some of the 5 biggest lessons that I had learned. And one of them that you just mentioned there was shot dispersion. This absolutely blew my mind when I went through your content, because you talking about an example of Jason Day at the time, maybe 2014, 2015, number 1 ranked player in the world, best driver, and his shot dispersion was about 70 yards. Is that right?
74 yards. He was over at John Sinclair's place when he was number 1 in the world, and he was 3rd in strokes gained driving, and he hit 20 drivers, and the shot pattern is 74 yards wide. And it's just so shocking. I mean, it's literally so shocking how big shot patterns are. But now let's pretend we're playing number 18 at PGA West, where there's a lake on the left. It's not like hitting a draw all of a sudden eliminates. People talk about you eliminate one side of the course, and that's not really what happens. What we're trying to do is eliminate the double cross. Mm-hmm. And so like if you've got a 74-yard wide shot pattern and there's a lake on the left, the only way to eliminate the left is not by drawing it. It's not by fading it. It's by aiming 37 yards right of it. Again, if you've got a shotgun blast that is 74 yards wide, this would be an obvious statement. But for whatever reason in golf, we just with a shotgun, I feel like such a Texan always talking about shotguns, but with a shotgun, I know I've got a shotgun blast coming. It's not like I'm like, yeah, and there is a BB right in the middle. I just don't know which one of those BBs is going to be the BB in the middle. And almost as importantly, I just don't know which shot's coming next. So it's like you're firing a shotgun, but only one pellet comes out at a time, and you don't know which one is going to come. I know which one you want to come, but you simply don't know, no matter how much you focus, no matter how much you try. A lot of people are always like, sometimes you just got to step up and hit a good shot. I'm like, then why didn't you do that the first 71 holes? Like, it's just not how the game works. Unfortunately, we've got to sit back. We've got to pay more attention. We've got to be more disciplined. And that's the whole goal.
I just hope like golfers can realize that that's the number one player in the world, 74 yard shot pattern for a driver. I mean, I can't imagine what it is for amateur golfers, especially in the 80s or 90s or 100s. It's like,
well, it's huge.
it's fascinating, but I mean, we just expect so much from ourselves. Like, that's why it's so funny when I was like, I instantly, when I heard that, some stats just stick with you, and that one will literally stay with me forever, because I was like, wow, I've been way too hard on myself. If I don't hit a 30-yard wide fairway, 7 out of 10 times I'm disappointed or something. Or if I'm in the rough, like, oh, what are you doing here? It's like, what are you doing here? This is where you're probably supposed to be sometimes.
Well, and it's where even if you drop back to 3-wood, you just don't hit a 3-wood that much straighter than driver. And so it's like, well, I'm just going to put this one in the fairway. Like, again, good luck with that. Like, it's just not how it works. So yes, you will hit a fairway more often with 3-wood than driver. I shouldn't say you will, you might.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't. I mean, I definitely have gotten rid of a 3-wood and I just have a driver and a mini driver now. I don't even consider carrying a 3-wood. I can't imagine a scenario where I'll ever carry a 3-wood again.
That's interesting. Yeah, I love when people think too, I'm going to hit the 3-wood to lay up. I'm going to play it safe. But in reality, you could hit the rough just as easily, not to mention you're going to be farther back, which is just going to make it harder to hit it closer to the pin.
Well, and that's the deal is that, like, best case scenario for most people, you're going to hit the fairway 5 to 7% more of the time, but 100% of the time you're going to be 30 or 40 yards further. Like that's just, it's not quite as bad of a coin flip bet as I offered earlier with 2-to-1 odds, but the odds are being destroyed by the fact that you're going to have a longer approach shot every single time.
And the other part of that too, to me, is you talk about it a lot inside the program. It's just playing one shot shape. Like, I felt so guilty of trying to do the 9-shot drill like Tiger, trying to hit the high draws, the low cuts, trying to do exactly what the hole said you should do, and play it like the architect wanted. And as soon as I just started, like, I literally listened to your stuff. And when numbers are back behind it, like, that's how my mind works. And I was like, okay, well, then it's just, this is logic. Like, if you're trying to hit all these other shots, and I think you even referenced, was it Brooks Koepka's coach had mentioned
Claude
that,
Harmon.
I want to say.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so,
Claude, I've got the quote actually right here on my desktop because I
okay.
send it out to people so often. Let me find out exactly which one it is.
I mean, stop trying to hit 9 shots, basically.
Yes. This is going all the way back to 2015, I think, is when I clipped this quote, because it was before Brooks was Brooks. And I just had read it in an article. It may have been a different article, PGA Tour, where he was saying that he went back and simplified his practice to just getting back to one shape in 2015. But he like had the leader, was in second place through the first round at River Highlands. And the quote from Claude Harmon, who again is Butch Harmon's son, he's one of the best instructors out on the PGA Tour. The guy's phenomenal at what he does. And it says, when they first met, Koepka was hitting a draw and wrestling with different shot shapes. Harmon focused on simplifying his approach. And the quote is, so many guys come out on tour trying to hit all the shots. They want to be diverse ball strikers. I see so many players trying to get good at 4 to 5 different shot types, and they aren't good at any of them. The punchline is they're talking about tour players there, not like club guys. He's like, these guys are trying to get good at 4 to 5 different shots, and they suck at all of them. And then he finishes it off by saying, we worked on making Brooks's golf swing as repeatable and one-dimensional as possible. And that's, a guy like Keith Mitchell, who I started working with after the first 2 events of last season. And he's literally just the best driver. I mean, again, everyone's like Rory. I'm like, no, actually, Keith is as good or better. Keith is year in, year out. And last year he finished 4th in strokes gained driving again. And when we first have our conversations, he's like, yeah, I only cut the driver. And it's just amazing once you understand. And again, I don't care if it's a cut or a draw, but with the driver specifically, just doing one thing, it's just such a hard club it's the longest club, being swung the fastest with the flattest face in the bag, the least amount of loft. It's just a really hard club to barely change the face to path relationship successfully. And again, the biggest problem is the fact that double crosses are just always off the planet. So I cut 100% of my tee shots. And if I get up somewhere now and I'm going to try to hit a draw with a driver, my miss is going to typically be at least a third of the time a block cut. So now I've aimed it further right and I've block cut it. It's just off the planet. And so while, yes, I get it, it'd be cool to hit a draw on this hole, I just am going to double cross it far too often. It's just not the play. And if the hole has trees or a crossing hazard or whatever that makes the hole not favor a fade, then I just need to change clubs rather than try to hit the shape the different direction.
And for me too, it's like just so much easier mentally because you're not thinking like, because I always play a cut as well. So when I was trying to play two ways, I'm hitting a draw. I'm like, okay, well, start to think mechanical when I'm on the golf course and thinking, oh, I need to maybe take a little more inside, and kind of roll my hands. And I'm start thinking with a cut, I know that's my shot. I get up there, I pick the left side of the fairway or wherever it is, and I just can swing freely. I'm not thinking as much. And I feel like that just helps so much more clear you up, because if you're thinking about mechanics out there, especially the everyday golfer, it's going to be really, really hard to execute that shot consistently.
I mean, and the key to why I keep saying with the driver specifically, again, I am a big proponent of just doing one thing with the irons, but also what you're technically doing when you change shot shape is you're altering the face and path relationship. Well, with the driver, because you can't really alter ball position, you only have one way to change the face to path relationship, and that's literally by changing your swing. Mm-hmm. So you're, by definition, again, as Claude says, we worked on making Brooks' swing as repeatable and one-dimensional as possible. With the driver, you literally only have one way of shaping it both ways, and that's by changing your swing. And that's just a bad idea. At least with the irons, you can move ball position with a 7-iron around 3 or so balls, and it's not the end of the world. So if the ball is further up in your stance, the path is going to tend to be further left, which would favor a cut. If the ball is further back in your stance, it's going to push the path right, which will favor a draw. But what's honestly funny, and I get this a lot with college coaches of slower swing speed players, senior, older players, if you just don't hit the ball as hard for whatever reason as some people, they tend to want to draw the driver because they think it's going to go further. Right. And then they tend to want to fade the irons because they think it's going to go higher and softer. And it's like, you're literally working against ball position there. You've got the ball up with your driver, you're trying to hit fades. You've got the ball back with your irons, and you're trying to hit cuts. That sounds like a pretty frustrating way to go about it to me.
Yeah, I was going to say that's way too much thinking for the average player, I think, out there. I feel like I like that, though. I never really thought about changing it with your driver. Like you said, you can't change ball position, or you probably shouldn't be changing ball position very much. And so we got the hopefully you guys can just catch that first off. For driving, shot dispersion is everything. It's going to happen whether you're Jason Day or an everyday golfer, so plan for it. I think resetting your expectations for that helps a lot. Second thing is, guys, make sure we're trying to play one shot shape. It's going to make it so much easier to hit more fairways and just think less on the golf course. So we got the driving part down. The next part, which is incredible to me inside Decade, is really where it gets a little bit more math when you're in a tournament and you're figuring out pin positions and stuff, is your approach shot. So I think for me, before Decade, I honestly don't even know what my system was, if I'm being honest with you. I think sometimes, I thought I had to make birdie, so then I'd try and attack the flag, even if it was a 5 or 6 iron. Other times I'd just try and hit the middle of the green. I really don't think I had any sort of system, but Decade makes it super simple. So can you kind of give a quick overview of like how that factors in for distance and if you should or should not attack a flag?
Yeah, well, I mean, people say it to me all the time. Like, I wish I knew this when I was in my 20s. Like, I do too. But if there's anything I really wish I knew is what my actual method of picking any sort of target was. But even if I did know, what my method or my process was for choosing a target, I think the biggest thing that most everyone does wrong is maybe you do pick good targets. So if the pin's 4 yards from the left, maybe you're aiming 5 or 6 yards right of it with a 7-iron. I'm not going to analyze if that's the right decision or not. But if I were doing that back in my 20s, I would aim over there right of the hole, and then I would hope I pull it. And that's, to me, if there's any one thing that I've really keyed on with players that is such a negative, it's just such a bad idea, because now you're putting a non-committed swing on it that you've never sat on a driving range and hope you pull it 5 yards. And now we're out there on what is kind of by definition a hard shot, which is why you're aiming away from it in the first place. And you're putting a totally non-committed swing on it. Again, this is the thing where it's so funny. Like, I agree that obviously sounds stupid. It's obviously common sense to not do that. And yet 100% of tour players I work with go, I mean, I do that several times around. It's up to as much on like literally on every shot. And so,
that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so like, approach shot strategy, it really does. Tee shot strategy is pretty generic based on how far you hit the ball and how wide your shot pattern is. Approach shot strategy does get a little bit more specific based on your abilities and tendencies. But basically, as a rule of thumb, we want to know how big our shot pattern is. And again, this is why I say, like, once you're a plus handicap, which I understand is off the charts good, you've got one set of rules. Once you're a single digit, you've got another set of rules. And once you're a double digit, you have another set of rules. But for the most part, you want to be thinking in like percentages of length of the shot. So if I'm 160 yards, 8% or 5% of the length of that shot is 8 yards. I mean, a lot of people might have just seen Carlton, Alfonso Ribera from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was just on Barstool's podcast a week or two ago saying, well, 5% of the shot, this, that. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually decade exactly. But
I saw that. I actually was laughing when I saw that interview.
Yeah, it was pretty comical. I'll give the Barstool guys credit. They did say in the actual full clip, "Oh, that's a decade from Scott Fawcett, whatever." And Carlton had never heard of it before. Alfonso had never heard of it before. Just his buddy that was caddying for him, or his instructor, somebody taught him, which obviously I don't care. But you take this percentage, so whether that's 5%, 6%, 7%, something like that, depending on your ability, which essentially it's what it is. If you're a scratch-ish or better, it's 5%, single digits 6% and 7%. For a double-digit handicap, you take that as a length of the shot, and you won't aim less than that from the edge of the green. So again, let's pretend now we're 100 yards. I've just got a sandwich in my hand, and we're in a tour event where the pin is tucked 3 yards from the left edge. Well, 5% of 100 is 5 yards. I would want to be aiming, and aim just means centering my shot pattern 2 yards right of that hole. And then what Alfonso didn't really get into in the podcast is then we've got surrounding hazards where you tack on some sort of modifier for getting a little bit more aggressive or more conservative, depending on how severe the short-sighted miss is. But that's the one other thing too. I love how these conversations just meander around. I haven't done one in a while. The one thing that I do think that decade and the math really kind of proves is rather than thinking of where's the place to miss it, the real question is how much do I not want to be short-sighted? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's the real question that's been, largely not understood. And this is where, again, you'll hear guys like Tiger and the best players in the world saying, well, I missed it in the right spots. Well, that's always either towards the middle of the green or just not too short-sighted. So that's kind of what that baseline number does, where you're aiming a certain amount away from the edge of the green. It's going to keep you 2 or 3 yards off the green to a pin that's 4 or 5 yards on the green, or it's going to keep your miss even towards the middle of the green rather than 10 yards off the green to a pin that's 5 yards on. You're just dead when you get yourself that short-sighted. And I think that's one of the main things that people have to really kind of wrap their head around.
Yeah, man. When I started applying that, like, doubles just barely, they have to, something really bad has to happen for a double now. And it's just so little of short sighting like myself. That's where everyone's going to struggle, especially when you're in tournaments. So, a lot of these Arizona events and USGAs, you're 3, 4, 5 off. If you're short sighted, sometimes we've got bad rough or, nasty sand. It can be a really, really hard up and down. So that to me is like huge. And it was so big when I actually went through it in decade that you talked about Tiger, speaking of him, about how he's kind of always done this instinctively. He really hasn't played overly aggressive with his irons, despite being one of the best, if not the best iron ball strikers out there. And you actually referenced the 2019 Masters where he was, basically, I think it was the last day you had the pins of where the pin was and where Tiger was. And he was, I think, maybe all 18. He never was like short-sighted.
He wasn't on the, yeah. That's the same thing with DeChambeau in the final round of the 2020 US Open that he won at Wingfoot. It's just some of the best ball striking rounds ever where, sure, they didn't hit a whole lot close, but they hit the right amount close. They made the right amount of putts, and they didn't make the silly bogey. Again, we've got something we track in the app in the Decade app called the Tiger 5, which are how many bogeys on par fives, how many doubles, how many 3 putts, how many bogeys with 9-iron or less, which we turned into bogeys from inside 150. And Tiger tracked how many blown easy saves, which we turned into 2 chips. And that's what I was thinking when you were talking about getting too short-sighted and making a double. That's, you get a little too cute with a chip shot now and you just dump it 2 yards short and then you don't get that one up and down. You just made double. And it's like when you finish a round of golf and think you should have shot lower, it's always one of those 5 things. It's literally always one of those 5 things. And that's what Tiger in the early 2000s, mid 99 season through 2007 or 8, whenever, he kind of stopped playing as much. That's what he was focusing on, was eliminating those 5 mistakes. And he knew that if he kept those to a minimum, he'd probably be in the hunt. And again, none of those are go out and do amazing things. It's don't do the stupid stuff that, again, everyone listening at home, 100% of us think we should have shot lower every single time we tee it up.
Every time.
And every round, 100% of the rounds, like even your best round ever, you think you should have shot lower.
We're
literally
out there. Yep.
Yeah, we're just literally insane. And those shots are always one of those 5. That's what we're trying to kind of recognize in advance. If I make a bogey here from 110, it's going to be one of the shots that makes me feel like after the round I should have shot lower. And then once you really understand that the scoring average from 110 yards on the PGA Tour is like 2.82, like you don't need to make many birdies to average 2.82, but what you don't want to do is make the silly, stupid bogeys, giving those very few precious birdies away. And that's, again, I don't want you out there tiptoeing around just trying to not make mistakes, but also at the end of the day, that's technically what you're trying to do, is just not make mistakes and trust the good stuff's going to be there.
Yeah, and I like how you said, too, with Tiger, I think you even had a quote where he said he swings aggressively to his spots. So he might not always be attacking flags, but he is picking his spots, he's committing, and he's swinging aggressively at that spot. And I love that. I think that if people had that mentality, that would just have a huge impact on their commitment to the shot and being okay with not aiming at the flag.
Well, and what you're talking about there exactly is, I've got a video in the app where Tiger, he's in the booth at the Hero, and they're asking him, Tigers, you've gotten older. Do you play more conservatively or more aggressively? And Tiger's answer was, I play aggressively, 100%, very aggressive. But I'm aggressive to my spots, which are probably more on the conservative side. Mm-hmm. But I'm still playing aggressively to them. And that's, again, getting back to that idea of picking a good target and then actually trying to hit it there and then trusting you won't. I mean, that's whenever I was in my 20s playing, I played in some Korn Ferry events and in the US Open, and I hated using caddies. And I just thought back then that it was because I'm a little bit antisocial. I'm a little bit weird. And so I just thought I hate chit-chatting. And so that's what I thought the problem was. And in hindsight, I actually just hated telling somebody else, I'm going to start it at that lip of the bunker and cut it back to there, because I knew I wasn't going to do it. And then I felt like an imposter. And again, I've had this same conversation with tour players where they're just like, oh, I actually realized early on I hated playing with a caddy because I hated trying to tell them what I was going to do, because I knew I just never was. But that's where over the last 2 weeks I played in the Texas Mid-Am. Obviously, I'm a 49-year-old amateur. And then for whatever reason, I entered the PGA Tour Korn Ferry qualifying. And part of the difference was I shot even par for 3 rounds at the state Mid-Am and finished like 19th. And I made a lot of just impatient decisions. I'm also just trying to play a little bit of golf. I haven't played much golf this year. And more than anything, trying to get some semblance of a game for Q school the following week. But then that following week, I told my caddy, I'm like, I want to play with 100% discipline and patience here. Do not let me hit a single shot. We're going to be playing in 5 hours and 20 minutes. So we're in no rush. Don't let me hit a single shot where I haven't painted the exact picture for you of what we're going to do, what I'm going to do on this shot. And he's like, cool. And so I literally went from, in the Tiger 5 mistakes, I'm making this up, I was just trying to find it in a spreadsheet, but I think I had 4.25 points on average a day, or 4 1/3. So I had 13 Tiger 5 mistakes at the Texas Mid-Am. And then the next week I only had 8 Tiger 5 mistakes at Q school. I shot 7 under for 4 rounds at Q school and missed advancing again as a 49-year-old amateur by only 1 shot, which I'll take that, all things considered.
Absolutely.
And that's just from playing with taking your head out of your butt. I mean, literally nothing more. It's not like I got better over the course of 3 days. I drove it fairly well, and I just didn't do the stupid stuff. And I do believe I didn't do a lot of the stupid stuff, even while still doing some stupid stuff.
Right.
I did less of it because I had a buddy there caddying for me. That it's a guy that he's a waiter at the restaurant that I like here, a Mexican restaurant. He came up to me one day. He's like, "Aren't you the golf guy?" And I was like, "I'm going to assume yes." But he's a guy that he's 22, wants to play professional golf. And so I was just like, "Well, you want a caddy from Rick Q school? That'll help me. I'm out there trying to teach this to you. Come out caddy for me. It'll help me. It'll help you." And it really was. It was amazing how therapeutic it was to force myself to actually talk every single shot out loud.
I'm really jealous. That guy got a master class on course management out there. He got to watch you talk about it. That's pretty cool, though. And
Hopefully.
one thing too, like in Decade, that really was fascinating to me, and I'm sure you probably applied it at the Texas Mid Am and Q School, is stop trying to make birdies. Like I literally printed that out, and I printed out that sheet of Tiger and where he aimed, and I wrote 3 things: stop trying to make birdies, stop trying to make putts, and play one shot shape. I literally put that so I could see it every single day, and that's again another game changer, because golf, you make it very clear, is about avoiding bogeys more than it is making more birdies. And is that something you're thinking about then when you are at Q School? Even though you know you need to make birdies, you're not ever thinking, oh, I'm going to try and force this one or hit it close?
Well, again, this is where, and I'm trying to find this thing right now because I don't even know how many I had. So I played first stage at Gunter, like so view leaderboard. Scott Fawcett, view all. How many birds did I have? Where's the card? Hold on here. Okay, I had 1, 2. So my birdies from the week. On a par 3, I hit a 6-iron into a 30-mile-an-hour wind that just happened to go the right distance, and I made a 12-foot putt. Like, I'm going to say that's a little bit of luck. My other birdies are on a par 5, where I hit a pitching wedge to about 15 feet, made it. I birdied another par 5 all 4 days, which was reachable. The next hole was drivable. I birdied it 1 of 4 days. The next hole, I pulled an 8-iron from my target, was about 7 yards right of this pin. I pulled it to about 9-10 feet and made it. 11, I made a 28-foot putt. 13, I birdied 2 of the 4 days, but it's a 360-yard hole, so I hit good drives and nice pitching wedge, or nice 60 degrees. A 2-putt on a par 5. On 15, I made a putt that was going to go 10 feet past the hole, and it hit the hole and went in. And then 16, I made a 23-footer, and 18 is a reachable par 5. I birdied all 3 of the 4 days. So I have 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I had 18 birdies in 4 rounds. And I'm not saying they're luck, but like there's some semblance of luck and or just the par 5s and when you had wedges in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's every other birdie was like I pulled the shot 7 yards from where I was trying to, where I made like a 25-foot putt. So I do consider that to be like birdies, require stop trying to make birdies. Those are just going to accidentally happen. Like, again, it's relative to your ability. I'm pretty good at golf. I drive the ball fairly well. So I do well on par 5s. But also still, I did just happen to drive the ball really well last week. And at the end of the day, I birdied half the par 5s. I don't do that typically. I mean, I did that last week, which is why I was even remotely close. If I had just hit a couple of worse drives on par 5s, then I'm not close. And I would just be like, well, I just wasn't air quotes lucky and or good enough. It's all kind of the same thing, but it really is just a different way to look at it.
So how committed were you to the decade approach out there? Were you able to stay patient and disciplined?
I think so. I mean, I do think I did a pretty good job. I had we have another thing we track in the app called the mental scorecard, which is, did you know exactly what you were trying to do with the shot? So let's just call that a decade target. Did you have a decade plan? Meaning I knew the exact target I wanted and the exact shot I was trying to hit. That's step 1. And then just when you actually hit the shot, were you 100% present and committed? It's just black or white, pass or fail. And so I would say that there were probably 2 shots that I didn't exactly have a great idea of what I was trying to do on the shot, as specific as I want to be. Still kind of knew what I was trying to do, but not quite as specific. But then the rest of them were just another thing that I talk about is anytime you have the word don't in your head, don't go left. I don't know how much this is going to break. I don't really know what the wind's doing here. All that, you just have to start over. You don't know what you're trying to do with the shot. And I probably hit, I'm going to guess 6 or 8 shots last week with some semblance of don't. And this is what's funny is when we track it, God dang, it just makes me mad as I talk about stuff like this because it's these conversations, they just meander. But in the Decade app, we track what we call the mental scorecard cost, which we take every single hole that you play relative with a perfect mental scorecard, and we show what you are relative to par on those holes. And we take every single hole where you have a negative mental scorecard event, and we show what you are relative to par on those holes. And I will say it's hard to remove the bias of if you miss a 4-foot putt, but you were totally focused, but you missed it. It's hard not to blame it. I wasn't paying attention. So being objective and unbiased here is really hard to do. But the actual cost, just generically across all users, is 0.54 shots of scratch or better handicaps. Like,
wow.
It's over half shot. Now, when I track it, I had Will Zalatoris track it, Maverick McNeely. I've, some guys that I think are pretty good, smart players. The cost is a quarter to a third of a shot. But here I am saying at Q School last week, I had like about 10 total mental scorecard mistakes, and it's like a quarter to a third of a shot, which again, I was over 95%, which is my goal. So I'm not saying I should have done better. Like I did as good as I want to do, but it's still at the end of the day, the only reason I didn't get through is by having a few too many mental mistakes. Even with the exact same game, I probably cruise through by 2 or 3 shots if I actually had 100% mental scorecard, which I will say I think Tiger's probably is at least 99, if not 100. And so here's a guy that just was playing with such an unfair advantage. Again, it's why I talk about meditation and other stuff so often, because Tiger, I do believe that was his superpower. I've got a guy named Sam Harris that I love, who's like the ability not to get mad, but the ability to simply not stay mad is literally like a superhero superpower. Like, so get as mad as you want to get, but the idea of not staying mad, like how many bad decisions and how quickly can you screw your life up in milliseconds by being mad for a little too long in a car wreck and just anything, where you just make a slightly bad decision because you weren't fully focused and present. And there's just no reason to hit a golf shot under those circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. We had a few golf hypnotists on the show and different mental game experts. And I like that you said that too, about getting mad's okay, but just get it done quick. You can't let it linger to the next shot. And that's the biggest thing I see with so many golfers is they get mad and then it affects the next 3 shots. Or I remember this one tournament I was playing in, 5 holes later, even the next day, this guy was still talking about how this one shot he got mad. I'm like, I literally said, I was like, are you still talking? Like, I'm like, get over it, man. Like, what are you doing? Like, I wanted to just throw my podcast, throw your program at him. I'm like, this guy's killing me.
I literally just had a phone call with Keith Mitchell. That was what I was doing before this right here. And this was a start of the next season. Okay. Last year was okay, dude, it was my best season ever. I'm all in. How do I get, let's go to the next level. And I'm like, okay, well, one thing I'm going to tell you, dude, I went out and watched him here at the Byron Nelson in Dallas. And on 14T, I was like, I should have gone back and looked at it, but I don't remember. And we're doing this literally as we're talking. And I'm like, but you had like an 11 or 12 foot putt down this hill. That's kind of a slider, but you missed it. And I just watched you. 14 is then, that was on 13 green. 14 is then a kind of drivable par 4. So the tee box is backed up with like 2 groups. And I was like, I just stood there. You didn't know I was watching. I stood there from like 100 yards away. And you just had your head down and your arms folded. And you just looked like you were pouting for like 15 minutes. And he's like, really? And so I was like, you know what? Actually, I bet I can find the scorecard just on PGA Tour's website really quickly. So I did. And he's like, I wonder what happened on the holes before. And we went to 12. And he had a 66-foot eagle putt that he hit 8 feet by. Missed it coming back. We went to 11. He had an 11-foot birdie putt that he missed. And we went to 10, and he had a 10-foot birdie putt that he missed. So here he is now 4 holes in. Yeah, so he started on 10 that day. And I just thought it was amazing because I was like, that was a great catch on your part, dude. I was just looking at the 1, but you missed a 10-footer, an 11-footer. Then on 12, you've got an eagle putt. You jam it by, miss it coming back. Now you miss an 11-footer standing on 14T. And probably all you're telling yourself is, I could be 3 under and I'm even.
I could. How many times have I said that?
Yep. And that's where I was like, dude, you're like 20 holes into the tournament and you're just acting like, somebody just kicked your cat. Like you're fine, man.
I'm curious too now. So you're 49 at Q School. I bet the average age is about half that. What do you think?
It's certainly not any higher than about 26.
Because I went when I was 32. I flew out to Nebraska and went out there. And I was shocked at the people you play with, just the variety. I had, 19, 20-year-olds. And then I had a couple of guys that were in their early 40s. They're grinding. Didn't even look like they liked golf. It was more of a job than a passion project anymore. So what was your experience like out there? Do you have any good people you played with? Or are you thinking too, like when you see him hit a target, like, that's not the right one? Are you still kind of thinking from the decade point of view?
This course, I mean, they played it. It's a future residential course. And so it's 100+ yards between most greens and tees. I knew it was going to be a difficult walk for me. I haven't walked 18 holes since June. I had kind of not a heat stroke in June, but I definitely had some struggles at the Texas Amateur. And then I tore some rib muscles in early July. So I just really haven't played much golf. But typically I play decent. So I'm like, man, this is going to be a tough walk for a 49-year-old who hasn't been walking. And so what was I thinking out there? Well, I sent myself an email on Monday, the day before it started at 1:00 when I was out there, that said, don't forget tape for your heels. Well, I forgot tape for my heels. And so I get a blister during the first round. I was like, you know what? I already look stupid out here as a 49-year-old. I'm literally just going to bring Crocs. So I don't use slippers in my house because it makes my feet sweat. So I literally have a pair of Crocs that have never once left my house because I'm embarrassed of them. And I took them. I had those Adidas shoes that have the zip on, the little turnstile tie on. So I could just, like a NASCAR like pit stop, I could just pop those shoes off and the Crocs on real quick. So I chipped and putted in Crocs and walked in Crocs. But talking about asking, looking at the other players,
every shot.
Every single shot, and walked in Crocs. Yeah, popped them back on. I would carry my shoes.
There's no video of
the bag down
because that would just be awesome on Instagram. I said, "There's no video of this because this."
I posted a picture of me standing on 5 tees in Crocs. So yeah,
okay, I need to check that.
It was out there. I don't know if I put it on. I don't know if I put it on Instagram or not. I definitely put it on Twitter. But the point being, the course is a residential course in the future, but they still don't have the houses up yet. And they usually actually have like interior out of bounds set up from where they will be. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, they took it down earlier this summer. And I asked one of the head pro, I'm like, are they going to put that back up? I assume for Q School. And he said, yes. And they didn't. And actually the out of bounds, most of it, like probably a quarter of it was awful. It would be a lost ball, but literally like 75% of it was 100% not only playable, but like totally fine. And so like the one par 5 that I said I birdied all 4 days, it's a dog leg left around these bunkers. It was so bizarre to me. The kids were out there just playing it to the right, bringing both bunkers into play. And I was hammering it out there left, and I had like gap wedge in.
Wow.
There were some things that's just really strange. But more importantly, again, sure, I had 18 birdies. I shot 7 under. So then I had roughly 11 bogeys, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I had 11 bogeys, which is, 2 and change around, almost 3 around. That's too many on this course. But then I'm watching some of the scores that some of these other kids are shooting that I've worked with and played with. And I'm like, you're too good of a player to make that many bogeys on this course. There's just no doubt in my mind you're trying to force things. And the problem is you get behind the 8 ball. So you start off, all right, I'm going to play some good, smart, disciplined golf. And then you try to force something. And then you make a silly bogey or double, like, oh my God, now I'm going to really force something. And now I'm like 4 over, and it's just like the wheels, and especially in Q School, your mind starts racing. I mean, I'll say in the first round, I started on 10 and I bogeyed 11 and 13. And I was like, dude, seriously, don't shoot 76 here. Like, I have the same thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I doing here? Wasn't even really wanting to play that much. I'm like, what am I doing here? But I recognized the thought. I'm like, that's just not helpful. It's probably stupid, and it's at best not helpful. And it was like, you had talked yourself into starting this round. There's no way you shoot over par on this golf course. Sure, you've made 2 bogeys early, but that doesn't mean you have to shoot over par. The course is still the same course.
Right.
And I played the last 12 holes 500 to shoot 69. Again, it's anecdotal that it worked. I'm just trying to show you that was my mindset. Also was don't shoot 76, but also I caught it before I tried to force things and did shoot 76 and just said, just stick with your game plan. Even if today's not your day, just shoot whatever you can. And I just do believe that most young players get out there, they get emotional, they let the emotions start making the decisions, and then you're going to wind up making a ton of bad decisions. That's, again, not to just like keep pushing Decade, but the one thing that Decade does for you is, even if you want to be as mad as you can be, if you can just take 5 seconds and run the script, you're at least going to make a good decision. Mm-hmm. You're going to pick at a minimum a solid target. Now, can you set your emotions down for 20 seconds and actually hit a shot at it? Who knows? But that's the one thing that, like Stuart Sink, he bought the app out of the App Store the week before he won in Napa a couple years ago, and then he wins 7 months later in Hilton Head, and they had him on PGA Tour Radio. And what he said exactly was like, I know it's making pretty solid decisions, but more importantly, like I just trust it and it keeps me fresh. I just let that thing, so it keeps me mentally fresh throughout a 72 hole event. And I don't think that I ever would have really understood how important that aspect alone is of just staying mentally fresh. I mean, again, I've finished 4 straight 4.5 hour, 5.5 hour rather Q school rounds. And sure, my body was exhausted, but like mentally, it was definitely the freshest I had ever felt finishing Q school rounds. And, I've played, I would think 100 of them in years past. And it's an exhausting 5.5 hour death march. And this one, I didn't have to think, but again, even still, like the last 9, as I'm on the cut line for sure, your thoughts start picking up pace. You start going a little bit quicker internally. And again, a lot of what I talk about with meditation and just all these target selection things is a lot of just recognizing, okay, dude, that's going on right now. You're starting to think and move quicker. Just be aware of that and try to control that a little bit better and make sure you run the script and don't make a silly mistake. I forgot the wind or this or that, and just make better decisions.
Yeah, having that awareness too is like when you're in a tournament and you feel the adrenaline coming in, or you feel the anger after missing a short putt or something like that. Having that and just being able to separate yourself from it, I feel like is so huge. And I actually didn't expect so much mental stuff inside Decade 2. I knew it was course management, I knew it was stat tracking, but I really like how much mental stuff you have in there, because I've used different meditation, hypnosis. Pretty much if there's a Psych K, I mean, if there's anything, I will give it a try, literally, to get better at this stupid game. So that was really cool.
But again, that's the key. And I would not have thought about this. So back in 2014, I caddied for Zalatoris when he wins this Texas A&M US Junior. Caddied from the US Amateur. He actually almost won the US Amateur that summer too. But then the next player that I worked with is DeChambeau. And again, at the time, I would have just been thinking all the math, it's all the strategy. But now, I've been saying this for a few years now. Now, several years into teaching it, I realize it's all the psychology. And again, this is because I was a lunatic whenever I was playing professional golf in my 20s. Like whoever you think is the worst out there, that's me. So like Grayson Murray catches a ton of grief right now. Like,
are you talking about just getting super angry when you were a pro?
Super angry and just psychotic. And again, this is where like Grayson was just on a podcast. I think it was maybe Fit for Golf, whoever it was this last week. And they posted like, this was one of the best podcast that they have ever done. Mm-hmm. And the comments were just like, well, he needs to control himself better. I'm like, the podcast, listen to it. It's about mental illness. Yeah. The guy's saying like, hey guys, the wiring's not quite right up here. And I hate admitting it, but like some of my wiring's not, it's part of what makes me good at a few things. It's what makes me bad at a few things.
Right.
But now being a little bit more aware and objective, you can see we've all got our issues. And so whatever yours is, being able to figure out a plan and then recognize when it's actually happening and have a plan in place. Here's how I'm going to avoid imploding when that happens, not if that happens, when that happens, because that's what most of the meditation apps, again, I'm such a fan of Sam Harris's Waking Up app. I would rather people buy that than Decade, honestly, just because it's going to make the world a better place. But he doesn't just teach you to follow your breath and have no thoughts. He's like, the thoughts are coming. Mm-hmm. We want to be ready for them and have a plan to interact with them in a more productive manner than just, follow your breath and think about nothing. That's not going to happen.
Right. So overall though, I mean, it sounds like a pretty successful trip to Q school.
I was thrilled, honestly. I really was conflicted about playing. I really did not. There were 21 in ties that get through. I did not want to make it through and have one spot out be 22nd, meaning I cost 3 or 4 guys going to second stage. And as the week wore on, I really was getting worried that was going to happen because I was just right inside the number all week. And so to miss by one,
to test your game. This wasn't because you want to make it on the tour.
I had zero intention of actually going and playing the Corn Ferry Tour next year. I mean, obviously, if you gave me a card, I would go play a few starts, but if I got a card that was going to require Monday qualifying, I would not have gone to Monday qualifiers, like trying to chase that tour.
But I just love that you walk the walk, man. I mean, a lot of people can talk golf theory, but you're just like, you know what? I haven't played very well. I have a rib injury because I was hanging out with Charles Barkley. You got all these excuses not to play in this thing. yeah, I remember even reading on Instagram, you're like, I got to pick my kids up after Q school. I mean, everyone else is, doesn't even have children, doesn't even have a girlfriend. They're just trying to survive and make it. You're just like, yeah, I showed up, threw my Crocs on, went out, shot 7 under for 4 days. So that's why I really respect it too, because I hate people that just are conceptually great golfers, but you really backed it up. So that's why when I was following that on Instagram, I was like, this is fun.
Well, the point of that wasn't because, again, like I've had a few people be like, well, the kids that missed it had to feel dumb that you beat. And I'm like, that's no, they don't. I'm good at golf. I drive the ball well and I've got good lag putting speed. The rest of my game is pretty sketchy right now, but driving the ball well is literally half the battle. It's the old Hogan saying, if you can't putt, you can't score, but if you can't drive it, you can't play. And I drive the ball really, really well. So especially at a course like last week, that's the only reason I'm like, I'm not going to shoot. I'm not going to embarrass myself most likely because I'm probably going to drive it well. And I did. But the point was just to show these kids like, you're better than me. There's no doubt in my mind you're better than me. I just beat you with my head, period. That's all there is to it. I beat you with my head. And there's no reason you can't have my brain in your head. It's all right there in the Decade app. Now it's not easy when you're 25. Again, a lot of that comes back to the prefrontal cortex is just finished developing for most guys at 25. Girls a little bit younger than that. And so it's not even that you're dumb. It's that you just are actually incapable of making good emotionless decisions. And so that's, again, I would not have understood that that's part of the structure of why Decade works so well for so many young players, but just being able to make good decisions is literally half the battle. I mean, again,
it's
like
hard to think like Tiger was doing that at 20 or 21, like think of his mental maturity too.
But part of that is his dad is a Green Beret and his mom is a Buddhist who he was, when he was in the car wreck out in LA a couple of years ago, as if anybody forgets when that was.
I was going to say, there's a few too many car wrecks though with Tiger. So you have to kind of have to talk about him.
He was out there doing playing lessons with celebrities. And so the day before he was actually with Jada Pinkett Smith.
Yep.
And she said on like the 5th hole, it's a 20-minute video. It's fantastic. But like on the 5th hole, when you're out there, you just seem like you're in this calm meditative state. And he's like, well, that's exactly what it is. She's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm definitely out there just trying to be in a meditative state. And she's like, oh, that's so cool. I thought so. And then a few holes later, they've got like a snack bar set up and they're just sitting there talking. And she says to him, let's get back to that meditative state. Like, what are your hobbies outside of, oh no, she's like, well, what are your hobbies outside of golf? And Tiger says, I love free diving. And she goes, well, what, like how deep do you go? And he's like, I don't know, like 80 feet. And she's like, oh, wow, you're a real free diver. Like, you're not just going down 10 or 15 feet. And she's like, well, why do you like that? And he goes, well, it circles back to that meditative state.
Right.
You get down there 80 feet and you get yourself in a problem. You'd better be able to control your breathing and your heart rate or you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And, so it's just practice. She goes, oh, wow, well, how did the meditation start? He's like, oh, my mom, her Buddhist background, that's where I started. And she's like, well, how long have you been meditating? And his answer was very informed because he just kind of smirked. And he's like, when I was born. So this is what he's been doing since he was basically born. You factor that in with his dad's Green Beret antics that he threw on him during practice and everything. And I'm definitely not suggesting do that, but it really was the perfect storm of making a great golfer. Now, 99% of the time it backfires and the kids and parents don't have a relationship because they've just been too hard on them. But this one worked and it worked out perfectly. You could obviously easily make the argument, well, did it? Because obviously Tiger had his own issues in life and everything from just being too much of a peak performer. But from a golf standpoint, it was pretty much spot on. But again, this is where it's so interesting is I hate Twitter and social media so much, but it does give you more access to all-time great athletes. Jordan, LeBron, there's a guy named George Mumford. He's got a book, The Mindful Athlete. And this is the guy that, the great coaches, Pete Carroll, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, the great players, LeBron, Kobe, Jordan. This guy worked with all of them on meditation. It's like, there you go. Again, I used to be kind of, feel a little sketchy about talking about meditation. So
yeah, I've been there myself. I get it.
Yeah, but at this point,
it's
like
everyday practice then, or is that something you're thinking about? Like, a lot of people are like, oh, I just do it 10 minutes in the morning. And it's like, well, it's not really like enough to like, you can't do something, 10 push-ups a day and you're gonna have a 6-pack tomorrow.
But once you've done it enough and you kind of know so yes, it should be, I do it a couple times a week for sure. It would be great to do it every day, but I've done some other stuff where I know the point. Now, again, it would be better to do it more often, but once you understand the point, then you've kind of got it. Again, you can kind of snap into, again, I think people think of like, we used to think that Tiger was playing golf hypnotized in the late 90s, early 2000s, like literally pocket watch hypnotized. And now I understand that's not what it is. It's just actually like a moving meditation, like a Tai Chi. But again, so much of this is you're just trying to recognize, God, I hit it so good on the range and I never can get into the course, or just all these dumb things we think is to just recognize them before it spirals out of control. That's the point. And again, I used to do these other apps where it's just follow your breath and whatever. But then Tim Ferriss is another guy that I love. He's got a funny quote from one of his podcasts where he's like, I always failed at meditation. And Sam Harris is like, well, you can't fail at meditation, first of all. He's like, no, I would, because I'd get like 2 minutes in and they'd just be saying, follow your breath. And I hadn't done it a single time. I'd get all pissed off. I'd slam a pot of coffee and I'd storm out the door. I'm like, that's the exact antithesis of the point.
Right.
You're supposed to have, your brain is supposed to be bombarded with thoughts constantly, but you're trying to recognize them again before they ruminate. And again, like I say, Sam's got this just great way that he talks about it. He's like, where if your mind was somebody else and they just came in your front door and they just followed you around saying the stuff that you say to yourself all day long, like literally just constantly talking to you and also being really negative a lot, you would kill them. I mean, you would literally commit murder in 48 hours. A very sane 100%. Person would murder this person in under 48 hours. And that's what we're trying to get our brain to stop being.
Don't you wish they actually taught useful stuff like that in school?
Oh, trust me, that is. I try to get my kids to do it, and it's so hard to get these young people to understand. But it is, again, I feel like that's why I try to talk about it so much. It is the superpower of peak performance and of just honestly living a good life, in my opinion. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're pretty much riding around with a terrorist in your head, and
literally a terrorist.
I get it too, man. It's like it just doesn't stop. So once you can kind of recognize it in golf, man, golf just has the worst way, because you're out there 4 or 5 hours, you're by yourself. I mean, way too much time to let all that happen in your mind.
It is nothing but downtime, and that's a problem.
Perfect. Well, I know we went a little bit long today, man, but really loved hearing from you. And like I said, I've had just nothing but great success with Decade, and I'm going to go through it again in the off season because I know I can still learn more and get the basics down. So just before we sign off here, there are 2 different types of Decade. So can you give just a quick overview of the Elite and the Foundations and which one's going to be best for each type of player?
Yeah, it really is all the same content. I mean, I just tell people if you're a person who's shooting in the 70s or better, you're ready for Elite. But really the main difference is with Elite, you get all of the content, which is, I mean, a ton. It's about 4 hours of tutorial content, but then there's another, God knows how many, 20, 50 hours of just content that you can just watch if you want to. You get, access to all of it on day one, as well as a more robust stats portal, free yardage books, a bunch of stuff like that. Foundations, it's the same content, but I just chop it up into like 6 months of an hour or an hour and a half. I'm just forcing a younger, less experienced player to take it in slowly. And so really it's not a question of maturity or intelligence. It's kind of a golf IQ. If you're in the 70s, you can probably handle it all, but I still say, man, don't binge watch all the way through it. And then also in the Foundations, it's a more stripped down stats package where we're just tracking the Tiger 5 because I really just want people to see, again, how many times they do these certain dumb things. I shouldn't even say dumb things, just pretty pedantic mistakes. And I just want them to see an actual number. And then after 6 months, they upgrade into Elite, into the full stats portal. And then what we really try to drive as much as anything is from the stats. Like most people, like if they read just 1,000 different stats, they have no idea, like 57% of the fairways, is that good or bad? I have no idea. How far do you hit it? I mean, that's how many times you hit it in penalties. That's just not useful information. So we try to make it to where it's digestible, but then we also create these little 3 to 5 minute videos that you get one a week that's tailored to your statistics. So we've got a library of hundreds of videos where it's like a choose your own adventure book. Like if you run 4 putts from 20 feet, 10 feet by in a day, you might get a video on speed control or patience on putting. Stop trying to make putts. Again, that's something you see a lot where a player will miss 3 or 4 10-footers in a row and the next 15-footers going 8 feet by every single time because they don't want to leave this one short again. So we just really try to make the stats package useful. So
the stats are
foundations
awesome too, man. I love it. As soon as I get home from a tournament, I get my pin sheet out. I got all my notes on there, get right in, do the video game entry, and then I spit it out some results and see where we stand.
It's not easy. I mean, again, data collection takes time. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. It's not, to get better, but this is the thing that's hard is it feels abstract when you're inputting your stats at home, as opposed to if you're chipping and putting, you're like, I'm getting better right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to believe that inputting data is actually getting me better. But again, my joke is if you feel like you should have shot lower every single day and don't, only one of two things can be true. You're not as good as you think you are, or you made mental and strategic mistakes.
Right.
It literally can be nothing else. So yeah, chipping and putting might help you get better over the course of a year. But if you just feel like you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, this is the only way to stop that. It's literally the only way to stop that. It's just not going to happen by magic.
Yeah, and as you've shown, man, it's all in the data. Just follow the numbers and leads to wicked smart golf. So thank you again. Really love following your journey. Again, everybody needs to take advantage of Decade. I have a blog post I just published about it. We'll link to it down in the show notes and all the links down below. So if you have any questions, make sure to let me know. Make sure to follow Scott on Instagram or Twitter. And we'll link to everything down below. But thank you again for being a guest. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it as always.